The drums echoed across the 9 villages. The wrestling ground shook as 2 warriors fought with the strength of lions. Then came a moment of silence, before one man struck like thunder. His name was Okonkwo, and from that day, fear and respect followed him wherever he went. But no one knew that the same fire that made him a hero would one day burn everything he loved. Before we begin this powerful tale, if you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe to our channel and leave a comment to encourage us. Your support helps us bring more stories to life. In the land of Umuofia, strength was not just admired, it was the very breath of a man's life. And among all the men of that proud clan, none burned brighter, none struck harder, none rose faster than Okonkwo. His story was told in the market squares, sung by the drummers, whispered by children at night. But his greatness was born from a single moment, the wrestling match that shook the 9 villages. On that day, the people gathered like waves of the sea, filling the wrestling ground until there was no space left. The talking drums called out, thundering messages from one end of the land to the other. Come and see. Come and see the battle of lions. In the center stood Amalinze the Cat, unbeaten for 7 years. His body was lithe, his movements as smooth as the slither of a snake. He was called the Cat because no man had ever thrown him, his back had never touched the dust. Facing him was a young warrior, broad-shouldered, fierce-eyed, with muscles carved from years of toil under the sun. This was Okonkwo. The fight began. The crowd roared. They clashed, twisting, turning, grunting like wild beasts. Dust rose in thick clouds. Children screamed with excitement. Women shouted praises to their chi. Amalinze fought with the skill of experience, but Okonkwo fought with the hunger of a man who carried shame on his back, the shame of his father's weakness. The struggle seemed endless. Sweat poured. The ground trembled. Then, in a flash, Okonkwo's strength erupted. He lifted Amalinze high into the air and smashed him to the ground with thunderous force. Silence struck the crowd for a heartbeat. Then came an explosion of voices. The cat had fallen. His reign was over. That single victory was the spark that lit Okonkwo's fame. From that moment, his name became thunder in Umuofia. Yet, behind the glory stood a shadow. For Okonkwo was the son of Unoka, a man whose name carried no honor. Unoka was gentle, a lover of music and palm wine. His flute could melt hearts, his laughter could ease pain, but his life was marked by failure. He was poor, owing debts to many men. His hut was always bare, his fields thin, his barns empty. He was known not for titles or strength, but for borrowing and never repaying. When other men rose before dawn to farm their yams, Unoka lingered with his flute. When others built wealth, he wasted his coins on wine. He had no shame in borrowing, smiling as he promised to pay another day. The villagers laughed at him, some pitied him, but none respected him. When Unoka died, he left behind no titles, no legacy, only debts and the bitter taste of shame. And this was the wound that lived in Okonkwo's heart. He hated weakness, he despised idleness, and above all, he feared failure. Every drop of sweat he shed, every title he sought, every harsh word he spoke was a vow to bury his father's name beneath his own greatness. Okonkwo did not inherit wealth. He had no strong hand to guide him, but he carved his own path with iron determination. By the sweat of his brow he farmed his yams, the king of crops. He borrowed seed yams from the wealthy, not to squander like his father, but to plant and multiply. He worked through sun and rain, clearing fields until his back ached, his hands blistered, and his feet cracked. The gods favored his strength. His first harvest was poor, for the earth tested him with drought and heavy rains. But Okonkwo did not despair. He pressed on, laboring like 10 men. Soon, his barns grew, filled with yams stacked high like towers. His fame spread beyond Umuofia. He became known not only as a great wrestler, but as a warrior. He fought in battles, bringing home human heads as proof of his valor. He earned titles, a mark of greatness among the Igbo. He built his compound wide, with huts for each of his wives, and an obi for himself. His household was strong, his barns full, his children many. When Okonkwo walked through the village, men lowered their voices. Women glanced with respect and fear. Children ran out of his way. He was a leopard among goats. But the fire that made Okonkwo great also made him feared. He ruled his household with a heavy hand. His wives lived in caution, his children in silence. A word too slow, a mistake too small, and his temper blazed. He believed affection was weakness, gentleness was cowardice. He scorned men who loved too softly or spoke too kindly. To him, such men were like Unoka, failures unworthy of respect. His greatest fear was that his blood would betray him. Each time he looked at his eldest son, Nwoi, and saw signs of laziness or softness, anger rose within him. He would rather see his son dead than weak. To Okonkwo, strength was life, and weakness was death. Still, Unoka's memory lingered. Let us recall the man briefly. He loved the flute more than the hoe. He laughed often, sang joyfully, and made friends easily. But he was a man the earth rejected. Once, the oracle told him he had a weak chi, a bad destiny. He would never prosper. Unoka simply smiled, strummed his flute, and said, "Life is short, let us drink." When he died, the villagers buried him in the evil forest, for it was forbidden to bury such men among the honored dead. To this day, when Okonkwo remembered, bitterness filled him. He clenched his fists and swore that his children would never walk in their grandfather's shadow. The elders of Umuofia often spoke in proverbs, for proverbs were the palm oil with which words were eaten. They said, "A child who washes his hands clean eats with the elders." And so it was with Okonkwo. He had washed his hands of his father's shame, and now he ate with men of title. But the elders also warned, "The man who never bends will one day break." They watched Okonkwo's fiery spirit, his relentless drive, his merciless temper, and they wondered what fate the gods had prepared for him. Okonkwo's fame was still rising. His barns were heavy with yams, his wives obedient, his children growing. He sat in his obi, surrounded by the symbols of success. Yet, in the silence of night, when the moon lit the compound and the crickets sang, the fire in his heart whispered fears he could not speak. Could a man's strength protect him from his destiny? Could a warrior wrestle with fate? The people of Umuofia saw only the leopard that walked among them, but the gods saw deeper. They saw a man running from his father's shadow, a man driven by fear, a man whose fire might one day consume him. This was the beginning of Okonkwo's story. The story of a man who rose from nothing, who broke the cat, who silenced his father's shame, who built barns and won titles, whose fire burned brighter than any in Umuofia. But greatness is never without cost. For beyond the songs of praise, beyond the wealth and the power, a storm was gathering. A storm that would test not only Okonkwo, but the fate of his family, his clan, and the very land of Umuofia. And so we ask, what storm waited for the man of thunder? What shadow would rise to challenge his fire? Stay with us, for this is only the beginning.